YouTube, what the crap's going on? Welcome back to another Warhammer online battle. Yes, I'm playing as the stunties, which in online play is a bit of a risk. But I decided to risk it and just see if we could have some fun. Now, I want you all to watch something. I have these cannons, and right off the bat, I noticed that there's demigryph knights in the field. Cannons are actually very effective versus large units. If you can get them in range and get a shot or two, you can do a horrendous amount of damage. And I'm about to demonstrate this. So some dwarven artillery is good, and cannons are one of them. Right there, I just dropped like 4 or 5 demigryph knights. Look at that, shot those guys right off the back. They have a bonus versus large. They have great range and a lot of damage. So I've wrecked up a demigryph knight considerably right off the bat, and by the time he can do anything about it, he starts to react here once he sees what's happening. It's 5 dead demigryph knights on the opening volleys. It's brutal. There goes another one, and that unit is completely gone because he ran at that diagonal, so he's having to run away with his demigryph knights. So right off the bat, I've gained a massive advantage because of my cannons. Now he does bring up these pistoliers behind me. I thought they were outriders at first, and I was like, oh man, these guys are gonna wreck all over me. But they were just pistoliers. I was able to turn my quarrelers, and my quarrelers are gonna chase these guys off. Very sweet looking units though. Warhammer is a beautiful game. So my army is 3 long beards, 2 cannons, as you already saw. I've got, most of my long beards back here. I've got 1 standard miner. I've got 4 dwarf warriors with great weapons to do a little better against armor. And I've got 4 standard dwarf warriors and then 2 dwarf warriors with blasting charges. My heroes in the army, just one of them is just the standard dwarf lord here. And then on the other end, I have a runesmith, who is a very useful unit. He has a rune that does damage to like units, and it does pretty good, like demigryphs, great swords. It's not quite as good as Fate of Buna, but it does pretty well. Now, my opponent's army consists of a light wizard up here on a Pegasus. Interestingly enough, Balthasar Gelt. The combination of these two tells me that this player doesn't have a lot of online experience yet, because having the 2 wizard just means that you'll be competing for your magic pool. So if you are a new player, do not bring more than 1 wizard unless you have a specific reason for doing so, and in this case it's not worth it. He's got 1 great sword, 4 standard swords, 2 halberds back here protecting a rocket battery, and then he's got a couple of crossbows as well, and then he had his demigryphs and his pistoliers. There is quite the little skirmish phase in this battle, where I'm just kind of moving up to try and get in a better position. This map is actually pretty cool. It's got this nice ridge right here in the center. Very like wasted look to the map. Cool color scheme. Very dark and gritty. So his pistoliers roam too close to my runesmith here, and I'm hitting them with that that direct damage rune. And a pistolier has so low hit points that it's actually quite effective at warding these guys off because they got too close. And then between that and my quarrelers, one of the pistolier units is gone. Now, pistoliers are not a good choice versus dwarfs because they are weak against armor. Outriders are a far better choice against dwarves. They cannot fire in a circle around them. They can't do Parthian shot, but outriders are armor piercing, and they have about 135 range, which means that you can kind of come in and out of quarreler range carefully, and you can do a ton of damage to dwarfs with the outriders. The only thing you'd have to be careful of is cannons. But outriders are a great harassment unit against dwarves, and that's what I thought I was up against at first, and that's why I turned around so quickly and shot down this first wave of pistoliers, because I was worried they were outriders, and I was trying to take advantage of it while I had a chance. The rockets are very inaccurate, but when they do hit units, they do a pretty considerable amount of damage. So like right there, it blew up one of my poor dwarves. Look at him, he's like, oh, that felt good. Walk it off, man. Let's see some more rockets. He's trying to kill my cannons, but rockets are not good against cannons. They're really only good against blobs of infantry. Or actually, that's a mortar. That's not a rocket, so my bad. It's a mortar. But yeah, mortars are decent against blobs of infantry. I don't find them to be very useful overall. He's got his light wizard up here, so he does have access to Shim's burning cheese. And he's on a Pegasus. As long as he stays out of range of my quarrelers, he has a pretty good chance of popping my lord with it. But dwarves tend to have pretty high leadership, so killing their lord does make a difference, but it's usually not the end of the game for a dwarf army. It can be. It can lead to the end of the game, but like I said, a dwarf army can usually withstand it better than just about any faction can. Yeah, he's got his two heroes up on a Pegasus. His mortar unit gets left up here. He doesn't move it back when he pulls his army back from my cannons because I was damaging his greatswords. Definitely a mistake not to pull this unit back because eventually I'm going to be able to scoot within range with my Quarrelers who have 155 range. His Demigryph Knights just kind of sitting back here. I was trying to get a shot with my cannons, but I don't have line of sight. Like, the cannons can't take that shot from up there. I love the look of the mortars, like, swinging up and over. Right there is a pretty solid hit on some of my artillery units. So, doing some damage there. Like I said, pretty inaccurate, but they do decent damage when they connect with the infantry. I think that mortars are kind of overpriced. For as slow as they fire and inaccurate as they are, they don't really do enough damage. If they drop their price by about 150, they would be a lot more feasible unit for the Empire. So I've got my Quarrelers up, and we're going to start putting some shots down into these mortars so that I can stop them from firing. Oops, kind of below the map there. Yeah, the mortars really are cool looking units. Got like that sweet gold insignia on the mortar. It's pretty awesome. Really hoping that they make a blood DLC for this game. That would be pretty exciting. It would look pretty sweet with some blood DLC in it. These guys are getting shot up by crossbows, or Quarrelers. It's pretty soon that my my opponent's going to activate his crossbows. He was very, very defensive in this battle, and again, that's a typical sign of someone who's fairly new. And I just want to use this opportunity while we're watching a little bit of Missile Skirmish phase to kind of talk through some tips for new players on Total War Warhammer. If you're wanting to play online battles, now you're free to. I don't recommend going into quick battle because you're going to run into players who are cheesing real hard right now. I didn't with this Dwarf army, and you may end up with a kind of fun battle, but I would definitely recommend you go onto the battle list and host a battle that says, like, you know, like noobs please or something like that, so that you can kind of go play people that are maybe more on your skill level. Over here, my cannons were trying to get a shot at the Demigryphs, and it kind of leaves me a little bit exposed here, but again, my opponent's not quick enough to take advantage of it. He does move up his Pistoliers, and takes a whole bunch of shots, but because of their poor armor penetration, the Pistoliers just end up getting hammered by a cannon. Yeah, that was a pretty sweet shot right there. So his Pistoliers are going to get chased off. My troops are out of position here, and a lightning strike from his Demigryph Knights definitely could have silenced my cannons here and been a huge benefit. He's a little bit worried to get close to my Runesmith, though, because my Runesmith has that ability to hurt his units pretty badly with that rune. The Runesmith can buff up infantry decently. It's not real impressive, but the ability to damage the hit points of a unit pretty badly with the direct damage rune is nice, but unfortunately, unlike the Lore of Death, the cooldown on this damage rune is actually like 45 seconds, which is more appropriate. So while the Lore of Death is completely cheese OP, the Runesmith has no such advantage. Here, check out Balthasar putting some magic missiles down on my men, his Lore of Metal. So he's going to put a few spells down on me. Here comes another one over here. He's going to do Shem's Burning Cheese. Definitely hit some of my Dwarf Warriors there. Kind of a miss on my hero, though. It didn't really, just kind of grazed him. I got pretty lucky there. And then my Quarrelers are going to chase off his Light Wizard, and then the cannons are also going to take some shots at him. And cannons not horribly accurate versus the heroes, but they do score hits. And with the bonus versus large, they're going to do some damage when they do hit. So my opponent needs to get his heroes way away from his army. He's well within the range of my cannons, and he does nothing about it. So I'm going to pick at his Light Wizard and try and discourage him from using Shem's Burning Gaze anymore. And it looks like Balthasar is going to come up here and try and be heroic. Let's watch him. He's going to cast another, or no, it's Gehenna's Golden Hounds. I was thinking it was going to be magic missiles. Let's watch the hounds. They actually get over here into my Quarrelers. It's pretty sweet looking. So Gehenna's Golden Hounds tearing up some of my Quarrelers. Not a ton of damage, obviously, as you can see the guys getting up. Overcasting something like that would be more dangerous. His Light Wizard is routing, just got hit in the rump with a cannonball. No doubt the horse is going to be feeling that the next day. And I'm going to turn my attention to Balthasar. So my opponent is doing the absolute wrong thing here. So again, trying to give you a couple of tips if you're a new player. The Empire is a good faction to pick as a new player, at least I think it is. They've got lots of units and lots of variety, so it's a good faction. Either them or the Greenskins can be a good starting faction. Do beware of vampire rushes. They're going to be kind of hard for newer players to stop. I'm trying to think of some other tips I could give you. Take some time to learn the hotkeys, like how to group units, how to put units in guard mode, how to overcast spells. Take a few minutes to kind of study the spells before you jump into online battles and get you a feel for what the different spells do. Like, you'll see this player here was using magic missiles against me, which is, it's fun, it's cool, the spells look neat, but they don't do a particular large amount of damage. Take your time to kind of learn how to. It's gonna be hard when you first play Total War Online. It's a little more intense than some games can be in the sense that you have to control a whole lot of stuff very quickly. Now, I mean, if you're a veteran RTS player, controlling a lot of stuff won't be new to you. Did you hear these crossbowmen say kill the stunty gits? Nice. You can see Balthasar back there being chased off. So my quarrelers are in a denser formation, and his guys may have a little bit of cover from the woods here. But I'm trading fire with his crossbows, whom I thought I would easily defeat, but because of my denser formation, which I was using earlier to be more maneuverable, I should have undone it. Check this out. There comes the magic missiles. Ooh! All over my dwarf warriors there, but again, not going to cause a particularly large amount of damage. So again, learn what the spells are good for, and Balthasar is really best when buffing infantry. That's going to be his best use, either buffing infantry or cavalry, and a mount, like he has right now is appropriate to get him around the battlefield quicker, but that's his biggest thing. Plague of Rust is very good for Balthasar, and he has some decent spells. Gehenna's Golden Hounds can be devastating when it's used kind of behind enemy lines, but otherwise it's not going to be particularly useful. Did he just put a spell on these guys? Leadership? I don't know. I can't tell. No damage sustained. So yeah, his crossbowmen are defeating my quarrelers, and my quarrelers are also running lower on ammo because they've fired a lot before this. So, and with his guys, this is pretty smart how he's spread out in a wide line here. This still does help your guys be more survivable in a missile fight like this, so I should have spread my guys out. And then the armored and shielded quality of my quarrelers probably would have won me this fight if I would have spread them out and just moved up and continued to fire. But his guys will actually bring this back. So he will defeat my quarrelers. I just go ahead and let him do this. Just go ahead and skirmish with me. I already have him in a position where I want to be. There's still going to be some cool fighting towards the end of this, though. And I just want you all to see some cool cinematics on this today, too. Something that wasn't vampires. Yeah, I know this wasn't like high-level gameplay, but it gives me a chance to give new players a couple of tips. And then you do get see some cool cinematics on Warhammer, which they're really quite pretty. So let's give you a couple more tips if you're a new player. So I would recommend, like if you're going to go with the Empire, just a couple of quick tips. Spear units are cheap, and they don't beat a lot of other infantry, but they are good at slowing down monsters. They're good at slowing down cavalry when braced. So you can use them defensively when braced. Demigryph Knights are a must, and I would recommend bringing the ones with halberds. They're the same cost, but they're good versus other cavalry and monsters. So I would pretty much recommend using them non-stop. His Demigryphs came in. I was able to use my rune to start drawing down his hit points, and then my cannons were able to open fire pretty quickly too. So, but his Demigryph Knight's not able to get through my lines, and there they just got hit with a pretty good cannon volley. So that's another tip I'll give you. If you're playing against a faction that has artillery, know what their artillery is good against. My cannons are good against large targets like Demigryph Knights, so be aware of that and keep your Demigryph Knights way clear of this. How do you deal with artillery like I have? Well, as the Empire, like I said, keep your large targets out of range, move your army forward, and go ahead and attack. The dwarves are defensive. None of their units have very much offensive capability. Empire units are going to be better when they're on the offense than the dwarves would be. So get your guys on offense. He could have come and attacked my guys. Maybe tried to use his crossbows to tear down some of my miners with blasting charges, because these guys have a specific purpose here, and they're going to demonstrate it here in a moment. These guys are meant to cause some damage and disrupt his charge, so that my dwarves, which really have a poor charge, can get into combat without having taken the enemy charge. My runesmith is obviously meant to buff my men so that they will do better in the fight, and even cheap dwarf warriors are going to be relatively sturdy for their price, not quite as cost effective as just like spearmen or something, but they're going to be useful. So these miners with blasting charges are going to cause some initial damage to charging units. I was kind of hoping to hit the great swords. I'm trying to see where, yeah, here's the great swords. I was really hoping the most to slow them down. and I actually get them right here. So the great swords get slowed down, and then I'm able to let them kind of take their charge, and I can kind of countercharge them once they've taken a little bit of damage. So all my dwarfs are now going to come engaged because the miners have slowed down the enemy. So here comes all my dwarfs, and my runesmith is going to come and assist in this battle. You can see him making his way in, and then my my dwarf general is going to come up and support this fight as well. Yeah, my runesmith comes in, and I'm going to go ahead and buff my men with extra armor and give them some extra melee attack, and then I'm going to use the rune, the direct damage rune on his great swords, which is one of the more threatening units. You can see this is going to start dropping their hit points pretty quick, and it's going to be an effective way for me to take these guys down. Balthasar was kept pushed back, and his demigryph knights got killed by my... check out this vortex back here. It's got a few of my dwarfs caught in it. These guys going for a ride in the whirlwind. Wasn't a real effective spell. Again, those things kind of need to be cast sideways. They move in kind of a linear fashion, so you would want to get kind of down the side of the line and fire it down the side of the line. So I was able to easily defeat my opponent here, which you're not going to see often with Dwarves versus Empire. I'm still trying to work on Dwarvish builds that have a chance now. Even if my player had been a relatively strong and experienced player here, that first few shots with my cannons, those can come quick. And destroying a demigryph knight with these cannons can quickly pay for itself, because the cannons are not wildly expensive for the dwarves. I think they are one of the few artillery units for the dwarves that can definitely be helpful. The other option you have is gyrocopters with brimstone guns. Now, the reason why I'm hesitant to bring those is because a flying Karl Franz can give those things absolute grief, and so can handgunners and crossbows and all kinds of stuff, whereas the cannons, yes, they limit your mobility, but they also give you the opportunity to fire from long range into large units so that you can do a lot of damage. So again, maybe just kind of come in here. Like I said, let's give some beginners a couple of tips, because definitely want that to be my purpose in some of these videos, not just to show me winning. I wanted to have some cinematics and like I said, give you all some advice. If you're going to be playing as the Empire as a new player, just a couple of tips. I don't find that swordsmen are a great unit online. They're not bad, but they're not going to be useful a ton. These spearmen, just for the price, you get a very nice bang for your buck, and usually bringing 6 of them as kind of a main line is good. They can brace well against cavalry. Where it says charge defense against large foes here, what this means is that they will negate the charge of any large enemy, and that's going to be a monster, cavalry, or lords, other stuff like that. They're going to negate the charge of that unit, and that's a big deal when negating the charge. They will still take damage from that unit, but the charge bonus being negated is a really big deal. In terms of units to bring, I definitely find that the General of the Empire is probably one of the best leaders to bring, and you can throw him on a Griffin, and all together you get a unit up on the Griffin for 1,500, which is not bad. And this is a decent air unit. Gives you some mobility, and I find it to be fairly worth it. In terms of other units, I mean, a couple of crossbows can go a long ways in helping to fend off enemy flying units and giving you a little bit of ranged attack. Demigryph Knights, for their price, the Demigryph Knights with halberds are great, and I would recommend bringing 4 of them in many armies. And this is kind of where you can vary up the rest of your army. Now, the Light Wizard is very good at sniping out enemy generals with the Shim's Burning Gaze. You can try overcasting Shim's Burning Gaze by clicking it twice before shooting it. It's 250 range, works very well against flying generals. Do be aware, though, that it's kind of a linear shot. Using it while you're on the ground will be less than effective, and if your opponent is hiding his general in the midst of a bunch of other units, it's going to be harder for that to land its shot. So just be aware of that when you're using the Light Wizard. A couple of the other units, the Steam Tank is very expensive, but it is a very powerful unit, and it can get some work done. You don't see these guys used online a lot. It is a combination cannon and monster, kind of. It causes fear amongst other units, and it can get some work done in melee. I've seen this thing kill hundreds of infantry units. Really quite a strong thing, but again, not always the right choice. Against the dwarves, these outriders would have been a brutal choice. He could have moved up and kept my quarrelers busy with the crossbows, or started killing my infantry while my quarrelers were busy trying to keep these guys away. And basically, you're going to get all kinds of damage done with the Outriders. Now, again, against the Vampires or Greenskins or Chaos, I would definitely recommend the Demigryph Knights. Against the Dwarves, the Demigryph Knights are overkill. The Dwarves don't have any large units, per se. So you have a couple of other good options. Reiksguard are a little cheaper and still devastating against infantry, and then Empire Knights are cheaper still and still pretty darn good against infantry. So those give you cheaper options that will save you more money for the remainder of your troops. Dwarf and infantry, like I said, is not very offensive, like it's not very strong, so you don't typically have to bring strong infantry to face it. I like to bring lots of weaker infantry to just swamp them, while the rest of your units do the work. So like for instance, you could bring 4 Reiksguard here, the 2 Outriders, you got your 2 crossbowmen, 6 spears, and then if you just wanted a little bit of extra swamping effect, you could throw in a couple of swords to maybe try and really tie down even more dwarfs, and then you still got 1,050 left. One good choice usually to bring against dwarfs also is a great cannon. The great cannon outranges a dwarf cannon, and it actually does pretty good damage versus it. So this would allow you to start firing on the dwarfs right away and force them to come forward, which is always a bad thing against dwarves. So this is a little bit of the advice that I would give my opponent here. Just take a little time as you come into multiplayer. It's okay to be new. We all were at some point. Just kind of think about what your faction is, what their strengths are, and what your opponent might do. It's going to take practice. You're going to lose some battles. I still lose battles pretty frequently, but stick to it. That's how you get yourself interjected in the multiplayer community. And if you are new to the multiplayer community, welcome. I hope you don't get chased off by all the burning cheese out there right now. Stick to it. Let's make this fun. HeirofCarthage signing out for now.